I didn't want to bring any controversy.
You totally wanted to bring controversy.
So I do it. In many places, yoga is taught with no Sanskrit, with no chanting.
I don't think this is a bad thing.
Do you have a guru?
No.
Is there some toxicity in the yoga world?
Oh, I mean, that's uncontroversial. Everybody knows that.
Do you believe in God, Ty?
If you believe in God, I don't. And if you don't, then I do.
Yeah, and...
Wait, do that again.
Hello, Ty.
Hey, Ali.
It's such a pleasure to have you here.
It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm really excited and curious about this conversation because I don't know where it might go. I have some questions here. I'm not sure if I will follow them because I'm sure it will develop in their own way.
We can just talk like we always do.
I think so. Let's keep it like that. So first of all, if there's someone around there who doesn't know you, if I ask you, who is Ty? What could you say?
It's a good question. I'm still trying to figure that out.
I would say that many people might know you as an Ashtanga teacher.
Sure.
Is this still something that can describe you fully?
I'm still a passionate, fully active yoga teacher because I'm not just teaching Ashtanga anymore. I've kind of strayed into another direction, a new direction.
I think we will dive deep in what Black Lotus Yoga is a little bit later, but at the moment I still have a few questions to ask you. So I remember when I first started practicing Ashtanga, the institute in Mysore was called Ashtanga Yoga Research Institute.
Right.
At that time, it was like, 10, 15 years ago or whatever. Yeah. So that word research is something that really resonated with me.
Well, it resonates with me too. I mean, I think that yoga has to have a very strong experimental orientation. That there's a way in which yoga is about finding out something that's not obvious, something that's not evident, and kind of being open to the unknown and discovering something new. And I think when we approach yoga with the proper orientation, we discover something new every time. So it's a research of sorts, it's an investigation, an experiment.
I know that you're a philosophy teacher, right?
Yes.
So I guess when you are in the academic world, research has a little bit different meaning in a way, because it's more maybe you research through books and stuff like that. So can you tell me a little bit more about your academic backgrounds, the similarities or the differences?
My academic background is in philosophy, and I got into philosophy because I had puzzling and still have these puzzling existential questions. And philosophers were talking about those questions, and so that fascinated me deeply. And so I really went into that. I got advanced degrees in philosophy, and at the same time that I entered a PhD program in philosophy, I started yoga. So yeah, I was 30 years old, and I was sort of struck by the way that the yoga offered a kind of more visceral, more direct route for exploring some of those existential questions, like who am I? What's my true nature? What are the sort of different dimensions of my soul? Yoga offered a way of exploring those things more immediately, more directly, without the interposition of the mind and of discursive thought. And I continue to find them both fascinating, but I realized rather quickly that they need to be mutually informing, and that when the discursive mind is disconnected from this kind of more immediate inquiry into the soul, when you're out of touch with your deeper self, then the discursive mind tends to go in really wayward and kind of messy and sometimes dangerous directions. Yeah.
I have a feeling that sometimes in the yoga world, that would be, a little bit need, in my opinion, of this kind of dialogue, of this kind of healthy dialogue, but it's like asking questions, even discussing authorities, even like saying, okay, but why is like that? Well, but, and sometimes I feel, maybe I'm wrong, but with some teachers, I feel that it's more like you don't have to discuss with the teacher, but also maybe it's based in a way on maybe a certain reading of a yoga tradition, of a guru-shishya relationship, when basically you just have to trust and surrender to the guru.
Right.
As you mentioned that you are creating a new system, I'm curious. I wanted to know a little bit your take on this.
So I mean, there is sometimes this attitude, both in India, in yoga, and in the Indian yoga tradition, of sort of surrendering everything to the ego, and there's something to be said for it. I mean, the idea is that kind of surrender is sort of helpful for giving up a certain kinds of egocentric attachments and so forth. There might be something to be said for it in that way, but if it undercuts the spirit of inquiry and of experimentation, and if it sort of dispossesses you of your power of receptivity, of listening more deeply, then it seems to me that it leads us astray, And so, I mean, let's say that if yoga does something profound for us, that one of the profound things that it does is it helps us to become more receptive. It helps us to become better listeners to ourselves. So I think many of us were beginning yoga from a place of disconnection from our souls, or from a deeper part of ourselves. Like we have this experience so often in kind of early to middle adult life of suddenly realizing that we've somehow lost touch with ourselves. Even if we're successful in our careers, in our relationships, things are otherwise going well, when we try to see whether our lives are measuring up to the standards that we've set for ourselves, and yet we realize that we don't really know ourselves. We feel like strangers, that we're somehow disconnected from our hearts. And it's usually at that point that people turn to yoga, and turn to spirituality, because it seems to offer us a way of reconnecting with something from which we've been estranged. Yeah? And so how then do we reconnect with that? Well, I mean, fundamentally, we're going to reconnect to it by learning to listen to ourselves again. And the point is that somehow, somewhere along the way, we stopped feeling into ourselves as deeply as we once did. Let's say when we were children, everything was sensation, right? I mean, the world was just felt. We didn't think about it too much. We weren't so conceptual. We didn't have so many rationalizations about our lives. But then as we sort of move into, let's say, our teenage years, and we start, or maybe it happens earlier, but either in kind of late childhood or early or middle teenage years, somewhere along the way we get wounded, we get hurt. We start loving things, we start loving other people, we start, of course we love other people from a very, very young age. At some point we get our hearts broken. For some of us it happens very early. For others of us it doesn't happen until we sort of fall in love romantically for the first time. And that always, wonderfully, essentially leads to disaster. And so we get wounded somehow, and then we try to protect ourselves, and so we sort of climb up out of the body into this more adult world of rules and rationalizations and so forth, and some of us even kick the ladder down to make sure that what hurt us before doesn't climb up. into this new space of the discursive mind. And then we sort of live our lives from that place. So then we're no longer connected with what we really feel. We're connected with what we think we should feel. You know, we have all these ideas about how we should feel, and we mistake those ideas for how we actually feel, what's really in our hearts. And so we lose connection with something. And life goes on, and we sort of pursue our interests and our goals and so forth. And somewhere along the way, we start to feel a little brittle because we're disconnected. You know, we're disconnected from our souls. And one day we wake up and we realize that it's gotten really bad, and we kind of don't really know ourselves. And that's when we're turning to yoga. So if that story's right, like if that resonates, you know, then the yoga should help us to, I mean, in the first place, this isn't the only thing that the yoga does, but let's say in the first instance, and this is one of the sort of most accessible of the ideas about the way that yoga helps us, is that it helps us feel what we're really feeling. So it puts us in touch with our emotional bodies, it puts us back into touch with our hearts. That's a form of receptivity, right? That's a way of, we're learning to listen again to our own bodies and to the way that we feel. Because we've been dispossessed from them, because we've sort of climbed up out of the field of sensation into the space of concepts and ideas, and because we've also been encouraged to do that by the world around us, by the social world, you know, where all the different sort of expectations that are placed on us, the education that we have, which sort of mostly teaches us to try and conform to various external patterns to sort of prove that we belong. And, you know, then we learn to sort of, you know, to cold shoulder what we're actually feeling, to cold shoulder our hearts and our deeper selves in order to try to re-sculpt ourselves in this new image that's mostly a projection of these expectations. We lose touch with that receptivity, right? So I think, like, yoga's most helpful when it gives us permission and perhaps even further empowers us to be better listeners to ourselves and to reconnect with the deeper wisdom of the body, not just to our emotions, to what we're actually feeling, but also to reconnect to the deeper wisdom of the body, which can teach us things, you know, which can be a source of guidance for us. And it can teach us all kinds of things that we usually turn to the outside to try and find answers.
There's a problem here, is that I had a list of questions, but you're touching such interesting topics, you know, you just raise other questions I want to ask.
Yeah, of course.
So one thing, if I followed you right, that you said, but I think is extremely interesting, is that you say, when we are kids, we are connected to our feelings, to ourselves. We are all intuition. We just do something because we like it, we feel it.
Yeah, we're spontaneous too. That's another point that's important.
Spontaneous.
And we lose that spontaneity.
Then we lose it because of whatever, school, teachers, parents, whatever, all the environment, you know, again through school, at work and whatever. But all these things are not really us. It's just external knowledge. Even when we start a career, a job, it's not us. Then we tell them, when I say, who are you? They say, I'm an engineer. I'm a medical doctor. Right. Is it who you are? Did you were born?
It's just a role. It's a role that you play. Yeah, it's a role.
But then, you know, when you strip down all these things, and okay, so no, don't reply, I'm a doctor. Don't reply, I'm American. What is left? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It becomes hard. So what I see in the yoga world nowadays a lot is that there's a lot of feel-good feelings. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of like positive feelings. It's like positive vibes only. I'm here for the vibes. In a way, I feel that, you know, world and life has different facets, and we have to embrace everything. We want really, and we have to accept all the feelings if we really want to connect to ourselves again. If we
Absolutely.
Otherwise, it's just a balm.
Right.
We are just putting a balm for the soul.
Right. You're making a great point. Like that. Let's talk about sorrow, for example, right? Because sorrow is the natural. It's what naturally pours forward when desire is frustrated. When the heart is broken, there's sorrow. And sorrow is, it's something that the world usually doesn't want to see, right? So there's a certain kind of pressure to keep a pretty face turned out to the world, a certain kind of pressure to be cheerful, to be positive, to keep your sorrow hidden and perhaps even concealed, pressed down, suppressed. And that's a function of the fact that there are all these external measures that you're expected to conform to in order to do well and in order to succeed. And so a certain level of detachment is necessary, right? And so sorrow is often thought of as something that we're supposed to just transcend, something that we're supposed to get over, right? So think about the way, for example, that sorrow is pathologized in sort of popular psychology, right? So, sorrow is an element of depression. Along with sorrow, depression and sorrow are not the same thing, right? But and depression comes with certain doubts about whether you belong, about whether your life is meaningful, whether it's valuable, and so forth. And sorrow doesn't necessarily come with those doubts. So that's how it's rather different. But certainly those doubts are pathologized, and those doubts always come along with sorrow, right? And I think popularly these things often get just sort of swept all together and then pathologized. So the idea is that, if you're having these like kind of melancholic feelings that you can't seem to shake off, then the best approach is a kind of biochemical one, right? Because it's considered that, well, the brain is sort of dysfunctioning. If you can't get over these melancholic feelings, it's a biochemical problem. We give it a biochemical solution. What we don't do is to see the sorrow as being genuinely significant, to see that there's something there to be learned from the sorrow, right? But yet there's some part of us that understands that sorrow is an essential experience, not just because of its pervasiveness, but because you wouldn't, if you stop and reflected on it, you wouldn't seriously wish for your son, for example, just as for my son and daughter, I wouldn't wish them to be spared of the experience of having a broken heart. That's an essential kind of experience, right? That, to fall in love and to have your heart broken is essential to the ripening of the soul, right? There's something that you learn through that experience. We'll set aside what it is. We can talk about that, but that's a further theme. There's something that you, hopefully, if you're present with the experience, and if you have the right kind of external support, there's something that you can learn from that experience of sorrow. And so you wouldn't want to deprive anybody of that, right?
Right.
And in order to learn the thing that you need to learn from it, you have to be present with it. You have to allow yourself to feel it. You can't just be turning away from it, right? Like, I'm sad, I better just get over it so that I can carry on and sort of do all of these other things, meet these other external measures of success. It's an obstacle for me. To have that kind of mindset is to fail to see that the sorrow has something to teach you, right? And so, yeah, if yoga's gonna put you in touch with what you're actually feeling, and if you've been keeping your feelings at some distance for a while, you can bet that among the various feelings that you're keeping at some distance is sorrow, a whole lot of it, right? That's going to be pervasive, in fact, in the things that you. It's not the excitement probably that you are suppressing. I mean, that's possible, but it's far less likely, right? There's going to be a lot of sorrow there that you haven't come into touch with, that you haven't been present with, that you haven't learned the lesson that it has to teach, and that's why it's still sort of there at the bottom of the heart, waiting for your attention. So indeed, it's essential in yoga to turn toward that sorrow in the very beginning, and I think that's why the first noble truth of Buddhism, right, is that experience is replete with sorrow, if you like, right, with dukkam.
Sorrow here it could be translated.
Could translate it like that it's replete with sorrow, and Patanjali echoes the same thing in the second pada of the Yoga Sutra, that experience is replete with dukkam, and that it takes a certain discriminating awareness to see that. And the cultivation of that discriminating awareness is central for Patanjali to yoga itself. So absolutely, being present with sorrow, feeling sorrow, and then trying to understand what sorrow has to teach, this seems to me essential to yoga as we have it.
I also feel that sorrow or some delusions, as you say, like a breakup or stuff like that, are also essential part of creativity. Mm-hmm. When the creative act often comes from a place of discomfort, from a place of whether something, like shocking or bad happened in your life, you realized there's a disconnection between you and the reality. So, I mean, it's the creative act in a way is painful. I mean, if you think, I'm not a woman, but so giving birth is painful, and it's a creative act. Yes. So every creative act in a way is painful. So if we really remove it's also beautiful at the same time. It's also wonderful. But it's coming from some sort of suffering.
Let's say, perhaps. Let's say that every creative act has to come from a place of nakedness, or of being in touch with your deeper self. So there's a vulnerability to the creative process. You have to make yourself vulnerable to the creative energy that wants to take expression through you, right? And to do this, you have to take off the mask. You have to take off the mask that you wear when you're trying to play the role that that society expects you to play, or that you expect yourself to play, right? You have to take off that mask that you put on when you're trying to conform to some kind of external measure.
But it's so strong in us, in human nature. It's so difficult, because I tell you, I used to work, and I tell you my case. So, and everything you say resonated so much with my experience, and I think many of people listening to this or watching this also have very similar experiences in life. So when they started yoga, they were in a place of disconnection in a way. They realized they were in a place of disconnection, because the point is, all our life we are like that. And most of the people, they just grow old and die always stay in a place of disconnection. They don't even realize it. It's just life for them. And so it takes courage to say, I want to do something. I want to reconnect with myself. It's not something to take for granted. It's not something that everybody's brave enough to do. Being vulnerable, like being like naked, removing the masks. It's could be painful. It could be like say, oh, maybe I don't like what I see once I remove the mask.
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely.
You don't know if you like it.
But sometimes I think that's the role of the pain. You know, I don't think every creative act has to come from a place of pain, but often pain, really crippling, debilitating, emotional pain, can bring you to the point where the mask just falls off, right? And then when you start to understand how it works, maybe then you start to relate to your masks and your roles differently so that you don't hold them so tightly, right? And you understand, if you start to really see the truth of it, to really see that you have to be able to remove your masks and reconnect to what's actually there to stay true to yourself.
I mean, I was in corporate, I was like working advertising, I was like in a very superficial kind of work, having careers, I was defined by what I was doing. Sure. You know, like almost everyone, I guess, no? Yeah. Says, oh, okay, you have a good job, you have a good salary, so you're successful. Well, and I was feeling lost. So when I found yoga, I, you know, slowly reconnected to who I was, you know, I wanted to be, I wanted like to come back home, like in a way, but it was very far from there.
You know, because it puts you back, you know, it puts you back in touch with your heart. But that's the thing, because see, even if you were doing something else like being a yoga teacher, you could be just as disconnected as long as your relationship to yourself is your relationship to an external role.
Is where I was coming. Is where I was coming.
Yeah, please, please.
Yeah. Oh, this guy is reading minds, huh? He has some powers. No, is where I was coming.
Yeah.
So at first, when I came to yoga, I feel, wow, you know, this is like, you know, Wonderland. I was like, what is that? You know, used to the corporate world. I mean, here nobody's wearing masks, everybody's authentic, everybody's themselves. Then, you know, digging a little bit deeper, and I realized we're just humans, and I mean, we repeat the same pattern. So there are a lot of masks. There are teachers who just teach that because they're supposed to teach like that. Not because they really feel it. Because it's what their students want. It's because what their teacher want. It's because whatever, you know, again, you know, these are the same patterns. Yeah, like, you know,
probably. I think most people who, you know, become lifetime yoga teachers, they do it because they had some profound experience with the yoga, right? So maybe there's an experience of disconnection, an experience of disorientation at first. You come to the yoga, it puts you back in touch with something, and you go, this is it. And then the mind grabs a hold of that and tries to sort of make a pattern around, so then how do I do this, and how do I make myself about this? And then I adopt all these patterns, I adopt all these expectations. I'm no longer relating to myself with that same openness and vulnerability. Now I've created a new prison for myself, right?
So what's your advice? Because I feel something that is like, people are still also, you know, all of us almost, you know, I don't like keep myself out of this, you know, we feel like kind of trapped. We feel like kind of, we need to do certain things, you know, especially nowadays with social media, we feel like we need to do certain things, we have to say certain things. It's very hard to stay authentic and to stay vulnerable and authentic when you start thinking like that. So what's your advice? You know, how you do?
Well, I mean, I think just recognizing that it's a continuous process. It's something that you have to keep going back to again and again, like making yourself vulnerable. You know, going back and back again to you make your yoga practice be a practice of taking off the mask, setting aside expectation, and just feeling into yourself to see what's there. So you have to keep letting go of your story about what the yoga's done for you in the past and where it's taken you and where you've arrived, because insofar as you hold that story, you don't make yourself vulnerable. So it's traditionally yoga has often been understood in this way as a practice of self-inquiry. It's been a mode of self-inquiry where there's an implicit understanding that it's not a formula or a description of what you are that you're trying to take possession of, but rather it's being in this mode of relating to yourself in which you're open to having yourself be revealed in an unexpected way, right? That's an authentic way of relating to yourself, right? So it's keeping the question, who am I, open, keeping it alive, right? Keeping the question, what is this all about? Keeping that question open and alive will keep you going back and getting in touch with yourself in an authentic way.
And I also understand that it's not easy.
No, it's not easy.
And I think most of the people need guidance in that. So also it's why I understand, even if I, over the time I had my doubts of a system, having a guru or whatever, I understand why, many people need it. But do you have a guru?
No, I do not.
Can you tell me a little bit more about it?
I mean, I don't, and I never did, but I've had mentors, I've had people that I really looked up to in the field of yoga, and and I've gone through my own sort of complicated process in those relationships of realizing at times that I was forming unrealistic expectations about what that person could do for me or what I could learn from them, right? And really being real about that, which is difficult and involves heartache for sure. But it did help me come to what I experienced as a more mature place of self-reliance, let's say, of realizing that sort of the kinds of answers that to the questions that the heart is asking are not answers that can be given to you by anybody else, right? That you have to look for them yourself, and you have to trust yourself and sort of stand in your center and go forward with an open heart and an open mind to find out, and that there's a great dignity in that. That is an authentic way of being. And no, it's not easy, right? Because the mind spasms against that kind of uncertainty, but the yoga practice really helps you to come back to that center, and find stability and trust to keep meeting yourself and meeting others and meeting in the world from that place.
For me, it's been a little bit more complicated because when I found out yoga, I felt I needed a guru. So I had a guru for a while. And then at a certain point, I realized this was not the way for me. I had to look for answers inside myself.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit less linear, maybe, the process. So in the initial stage of research I did in yoga was looking for answers, outwards. So I say, I need guidance, I need a guru, someone really to trust. I say, I surrender. And I realized, no, I don't want to surrender to anyone else. But I understand, you probably start in a more mature, place where you were already I don't know, whatever. We're all different.
Yeah,
and
useless comparison.
Yeah, no, exactly.
But I mean, let me say this, if you don't mind. I don't mean to interrupt, but relationship is important, right? Having conversation with someone who's older than you or who's more mature than you, right? But usually someone who's old, someone who's sort of walked some of the paths that you have to walk in life, right? And that you admire, that you trust, someone that you look up to in the way. I mean, that's invaluable. Those relationships are invaluable. To have mentors, to have...
But this is called mentor. In my opinion, if you have a guru, you don't question the guru. It's just, you surrender. If you have a mentor, you accept their guidance.
Yeah.
And you can even say, okay, I disagree maybe on this.
Yeah, perhaps.
And you have a dialogue.
Yeah. To be fair,
it would be amazing to have a dialogue
sure
with
that
a guru.
there are people who use the term, right? Because especially in India, the term to have a guru, it's a very ordinary thing,
exactly.
Right? And there might not always be that idea of, well, you surrender to me completely. I'm the ultimate authority. I tell you what you need to do, and you don't need to understand how or why. You just follow my instructions. That's the kind of relationship that we're rejecting here. That's the kind of relationship we know that's been toxic for so many American and European students.
Ty, this is so interesting, and this is something that I felt, maybe I'm wrong, but I felt there's something that probably was missed in translation, or missed in interpretation of different cultures. Because I realized, I did a photography workshop in India this year, and people told me, you're a guru. I was considered a guru in photography. A guru? What's guru? So a teacher.
Yeah, teacher, right.
He's a teacher.
Right.
So, but then when we translated it, and applied to our, in the West, we translated that to the ultimate authority, the God-given, but it's not necessarily like that.
It's all about what the relationship is.
Yeah.
What we call it is neither here nor there. But what is the relationship between, it has to be mutual, right? It has to be. And I've learned this more as I get older, and there are younger people who now, sometimes look to me for some kind of for support. Let's just say for support in difficult times, and I realize by relating to them that this relationship is not a one-way. It's not a one-way relationship. It's we support each other. We learn from each other. We sort of, we touch each other's hearts through those relationships. And so the dynamic is a little bit different than the dynamic between friends or between lovers. There are other aspects of the relationship that make it different, and yet that sense of mutuality is there. That sense of even making ourselves mutually vulnerable to one another, even, right? And so long as that's there, the relationship, it seems genuine. The power dynamic is there. There's no toxic power dynamic there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So do you think is there or has been some toxicity in the yoga world?
Oh, that's uncontroversial. Everybody knows that.
What's more toxic? What do you think? What is being the most toxic thing that should be
power abuses. Power abuses and teachers who gain a lot of power, they become intoxicated by power, and then those relationships just very, very quickly turn sour and unfortunately often rather abusive.
And is not this the problem? But when we surrender our willpower and we trust blindly an individual, we call it guru.
But then you're giving up your power to
Exactly.
experiment. You're giving up your receptivity. And that's something that we fall into naturally anyways. I think that's an important point, is to see that that when we allow ourselves to go into those kinds of toxic power relations with someone that we see as a kind of someone that we think completes us, right? We think that this other person completes us somehow, so long as we are in that kind of relationship with them. And we're deriving our sense of worth from that relationship, right? Now let's say this is what we do when we fall in love for the first time as a teenager, right? And and teenagers fall madly in love. Like when they fall in love, it's like, it's a beautiful thing, right? They go all in. They go all in. And there's a feeling in that first love that, because of course you're connecting with something that's much greater than yourself, the other person sort of sees the infinite in you, you see the infinite in the other person, that's genuine. But what you're confused about is somehow that ability to be connected to that infinite dimension of yourself depends on that other person alone. When you're a teenager, that's what you think. This person is the only one for me. I could never love another, and I'm the only one for them. We've been, put here either by some, cosmic, either intentionally or not. But we're perfect for each other, and we were made for each other, and this relationship could never really come apart. And then, of course, within a matter of weeks, usually it does come apart. And there's that great heartbreak. That first great heartbreak is there for you to learn that it wasn't the other person that completes you, even if the other person, right, helped you to sort of, that even if you did see the infinite in the other person and the other person recognized the infinite in you, and through your intimacy, you were more in touch with that infinite dimension than you otherwise.
I mean, we are already complete. There's nothing possibly.
I mean, for
we
sure.
don't see it.
Well, for sure, we can. There's a way that we need each other. The heart longs to have intimacy with other beings, right? And there really is a sense of fullness that comes through relationship that you can't, that you do not access in any other way. But to think that it's to confuse what comes alive between the two of you, to sort of reduce that to the other person, that's a mistake that we all naturally make in the beginning, right? And we have to learn to see and appreciate that mistake, right? If you don't learn it, then you're likely to go into your adult life and form this projection again, perhaps not with just another romantic partner, although you might just keep on doing it with other romantic partners, right?
Boss, a teacher, whoever.
Exactly. Or you do it with a guru.
Yeah.
Right? You do it, and some of those people are inviting that to happen.
And again, it's the same relationship. Maybe, let's say you were working in an office and you had this boss who was like, you basically, you were all the time complaining about the boss, but you were depending on him, actually you wanted to be like, in a way, to obey, and and sometimes, I feel there's a lot of repeating the same patterns, and there's a lot of patterns that should be broken, but I mean, they can only be broken once we really...
Maybe you have to live through them.
Or maybe, yeah. But I mean, repeating them is the solution.
If you're repeating them, then you're not getting it. It's like you're not learning what the universe wants you to learn from this experience, right? I mean, love has to ripen in that way. The way that a teenager falls in love should not be the way that a 30-year-old person falls in love. If it is, and unfortunately it often is, something's going wrong, right? There's something's not, as if the soul of the person is not being properly supported either from the outside or the inside in order for it to go through this process of development, right? And I think that spirituality is meant to help us with that very process. And yet we get hung up in the field of spirituality just as we do anywhere else, repeating the same old patterns if we're not getting the lesson that the universe is trying to teach us.
When you talk about universe, you mean that you believe in God?
Well, look, I mean, if you ask me that way...
Well, no, I don't even mention universe. Do you believe in God, Ty?
When you ask me that question, I think a little quip by Alan Watts. He once said that if you believe in God, I don't. And if you don't, then I do. And I like that very much. For me, spirituality is not so much about belief, right? It's about intimacy. It's about connection with other people, the heart opens out onto the infinite. It opens out onto something that's transcendent and incomprehensible. It opens out onto a higher power. This, to me, is obvious, right? I don't have to believe in it. I have to observe it. I have to be true to it. I have to honor it. I have to relate to it authentically.
So the problem is not the word God, it's the word believe. Maybe believing is more about the connection, as you say. If you feel it. You feel God. You feel the universe. Do you feel it?
To feel divinity, you know. I mean, that's the mystical side of religion, is to feel divinity directly. And of course, in organized religion and historically and so forth, that's often discouraged. I mean, just to put it gently.
And I can understand.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if you have a business, do you want people to skip your business and do things by themselves?
Yeah, exactly. Right, exactly.
I wouldn't encourage people to say, oh, but look, you don't need me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do it yourself. It's free.
Yeah, it really undermines the kind of power structure if the clergy is there to be an intermediary between you and the divine. If you start having your own direct experiences, your own mystical experiences, then you no longer need them as an intermediary to interpret, to put you in connection, to negotiate. I think one of the reasons that yoga's been so popular is precisely because it came to us with so little philosophy, with so little doctrine. I mean, the way it came to the West was in the form of various somatic exercises, asanas, pranayama, ways of sitting, ways of tuning the attention, and so forth. Of course, especially within the last maybe 2 or 3 decades, the interest in Eastern and in Indian philosophy has really swelled, and that's a wonderful thing. But if the yoga had come over, to Europe and to the United States in that mostly philosophical form, I don't think it would have taken root. What people are hungry for is that experience of connection. And they don't want to have to put a name or a face to the thing that they're connecting with, because I think collectively we have come to a certain maturation point where at least some part of us knows better than to go that old dogmatic route. We don't need more doctrines. We need more connection. We don't need more belief. We need more genuineness, more kindness, more openness and vulnerability.
So do you actually think it's a good thing that yoga, how it came to the West, was kind of stripped down of certain...
No doubt. I think no doubt.
In many places, yoga is taught like with no Sanskrit even, with no chanting.
Yeah.
We know...
I don't think this is a bad thing. I don't. I know that is probably an unpopular...
No, I'm very curious about it because it's something that I struggle to have an opinion about.
It might help people connect more completely with less reservation to the yoga, to themselves. And that's connecting to the yoga. It's not so much that you're trying to connect to a tradition, you're trying to connect to yourself, and the yoga is just there to help you with that, right? And so if you get too caught up in the tradition and how you relate to the tradition and whether or not you're faithfully representing the tradition and all of that, it's a huge distraction.
So I tell you, coming from my story, for me, for years I've been doing Ashtanga yoga, studying with Shurat. And so in that sort of tradition, let's say Miser, Patabi Joyce, etc. Yeah. And I was very much into like, let's do it this way, you know, how it's taught, yeah. Like how it's prescribed, you know, by the system. And, you know, let's say my love for that, you know, a little bit ended, and for several reasons. And now mostly, I feel I'm still doing yoga because I still keep like my meditation practice, but mostly it's not even about that. I mostly, you know, as a physical exercise, I mostly do weightlifting lately. Sure. Or other stuff like running or, you know, cycling or whatever. But my intention, I feel, is still there. I still always like exploring my body and see how the body connects to the mind through the breath. So my exploration is always that. Steve, I calm my breath, I calm my mind.
And this is something that you learned from Ashtanga?
I will always be thankful to the method because it taught me that.
Yeah,
because
sure.
Before, I was doing this thing unconsciously. I was running, I was going to the gym, but I was unconscious. I said, I need to lift weights. I was lifting weights. Now I do it with an intention and with a connection. I feel the connection between the body and the mind through the breath.
Yeah.
And then, you know, also, I mean, let's say bandhas or the drifting. I mean, look at a certain place helps.
Yeah, sure.
Rather than roaming around. Might be obvious. It's not.
So it's given you a mindfulness, and it's given you some apart from that, it's given you some techniques of sort of holding your awareness so that you can remain more present with yourself.
It's what I say. I go for a walk. Sometimes I feel like, you know, I go to the mountains and go for a walk. It's like the most spiritual thing I could do. Being nature alone, connecting. I really feel like I'm connecting with the elements and stuff like that. Again, you know, the intention, the mind, you know, all of this. But
very good.
But at the same time, you know, I understand that, you know, if I didn't do yoga at all, I would never had these experiences.
Sure.
I would never understood that.
Yes.
So I still think that yoga is an amazing tool to get in touch with yourself. And this is probably the best thing ever, you know, that probably is teaching you. Because, I mean, once you get that, you get it for life. It's like when you say, once you learn how to swim, you will swim forever, you know?
Right.
You never lose it.
Right.
It's like that.
Yeah.
You can't lose that.
Yeah.
You can't lose the postures when you get older because you don't do that anymore or whatever. You can't lose that.
Yeah.
You can't lose that.
Sure.
But in a way also, what about attachment? Because sometimes, you know, for me it was easy. I just say, okay, I let go of that and whatever, so I didn't feel any attachment. But sometimes what I feel is that sometimes we're talking with other fellow practitioners, whatever, or saying, you know, I'm getting older, I can't do this posture anymore, and this and that, you know. I don't know, what about attachment? What about...
I mean, I think, generally, there's a tendency in yoga to pathologize attachment. And this is insane. I mean, attachment is a beautiful part of life. Right? I mean, you want to have in your relationships with your friends and lovers
to keep them.
Genuine attachment, and in the sense that you're making yourself vulnerable to the other by taking genuine emotional risks. So if you have a relationship if you become so detached. That you can't take emotional risks in relationship with each other, with other people anymore, then you really lost something. And I have met people who've practiced detachment, you know, to such an extreme that they really have reached that level of austerity where there's no genuine emotional risk in their relationships anymore. And I think that those relationships are rather dry because of it, and that there's a connectedness, a kind of and a warmth and an intimacy that's no longer possible, you know. And you know, for me, I would rather embrace that dimension of life. And then it seems that the way of understanding the yogic teaching is that it's not so much about overcoming attachment, at least not for me, not in this phase of life. but about being able to hold those attachments loosely enough that I'm no longer controlled by the fear of having my heart broken. You see what I mean? I mean, I think that the greatest danger is to work yourself into a state where you're no longer willing to take emotional risks. Many of us do this just because we've been wounded, and so then we put on our armor, we take a defensive posture toward the world, we don't allow ourselves to really fall fully in love, right? We prevent ourselves from going to a certain depth in relationship because we're so afraid of being wounded very deeply again. And I think that many of us find these teachings of yoga, these teachings of spirituality, and we misuse them as a kind of defense, to prevent ourselves from feeling that woundedness again. We practice detachment. Yeah? I think there's another way of understanding these teachings where we embrace attachment because we're also ready to face the inevitable consequence of profound heartache. And we understand that we can learn something from that experience. We can say yes to that experience. We can embrace it. We can continue to love through it. And in that way, I think our souls can more fully ripen.
Again, accepting all the feelings.
Yeah, accepting all the
We're coming
feelings
back.
that come with that. Now, I mean, it may very well be that, it depends this is kind of more of a philosophical thing, like how do we understand the journey of the soul, right?
Yeah.
And if you take the perspective of classical yoga, something like Patanjali, then, at a certain point, it's going to involve a kind of transcendence of the heart's attachments, right? At a certain point.
Yeah.
But, I think everybody has to really kind of search their own souls to understand whether they're actually at that point, or whether whether we still have karmas inside us that need to ripen, and what we need to do is to figure out how to really embrace that karmic situation. And embracing that karmic situation means allowing ourselves to continue to fall in love and to make ourselves to be emotionally vulnerable, to take emotional risks, and to expose ourselves to heartache all over again.
But as you quoted Patanjali, Patanjali, there's still a separation, let's say, between us and the divine, and an aspiration to go from us to the divine. Is not really like how do you feel it? You feel that it's like it's not considered an Advaita Vedanta teacher.
No.
Patanjali, not at
No,
all.
absolutely
because
not.
it's considered that it's not about like the total unity, between like the divine is within ourselves. It's still something separate. So what are you leaning more?
There are. There are divine beings, and they are special Purushas.
Yeah.
Like they're Purushas like us, and yet they're separate from us. And the goal of classical yoga is not even to unite with them. They can be a help, right? But in classical yoga, the goal is to disentangle the essence of what we are, which Patanjali names Purusha, and you could say is, I don't really know what to say, but it's often translated as consciousness or awareness, as if we have any idea what that is, right? But to disentangle then our essence as awareness from the kind of matrix of creative potential that manifests itself as the phenomenal world. It's the disentanglement of our essence from our nature. And the divine can help us with that.
But I find it quite different from the, let's say, the Tantric approach.
Perhaps.
More like...
I mean, usually, sometimes this distinction is drawn between that approach of classical yoga and a more tantric approach, which is somewhat perhaps more about sort of embracing divinity within ourselves, kind of affirming life rather than trying to transcend it, etc. I don't know if these are really, I don't think the best way to think about these is really as two separate perspectives and we have to choose between them, right? We could think of it this way. I mean, and we don't have to, but you could think of it this way, that suppose that Patanjali is right, okay? And, you know, honestly, I don't even suppose that I'm in position to assess the kinds of claims that Patanjali is making about the cosmos. Do you know what I mean? So it's not, I don't believe it and I don't not believe it, right? I think it's extraordinary. You know, I hear these ideas about spirituality. They're inspiring, they're profound. They help orient different stretches of thought that I myself engage in many times, but I'm in no position to sort of assess them. So I kind of stay somewhat agnostic about them as concerns the question of belief, right? But let's just say, if we're trying philosophically to think about how do these two perspectives relate, this sort of life-affirming tantric perspective that's about connecting to divinity within ourselves, and then this, let's say, this classical yoga perspective that focuses more on the transcendence of worldly life, right? And the disentanglement of our consciousness from the attachments of the heart. You could say this, that if you're in a certain phase of your spiritual evolution, which seems to be more familiar, where your heart is forming attachments, that is natural to you, right? Then then you have karmas that you need to live through, karmas that need to ripen, right? Different sort of paths, different stretches of life that you have to go through in order for your discriminating awareness to develop up to the point where you can authentically engage in this yoga of transcendence, right? Because what I often see is people seeming to engage in this yoga of transcendence, wanting to engage in it, telling themselves that they're engaging in it. And what you can see very obviously is that what they're engaged in is an attempt to brace themselves against the world, to protect themselves emotionally. And I recognize it because I did the exact same thing, right? Of really wanting an out from sensuality, from sexuality, from emotional risk, from involvement with all of the complexities and complications of ordinary emotional life. And I thought, well, if there's a spirituality that can help me transcend all of that and just go beyond it and not have to feel in anymore to all of the heartache that goes along with that, then sign me up. But I later came to understand that it really isn't up to me to forego all of that lived experience. That it's part of my path, part of my karma, to live through these experiences, and that my yoga needs to be about opening my heart to all that so that I can embrace it and so that I can learn what it needs to teach me.
Thank you very much, Ty. There are topics I think we could discuss like for hours and hours. I would like to address something because I feel we have an elephant in the room. You mentioned at the beginning that you created a new system.
Yeah.
So what's wrong with Ashtanga?
Oh, Well, I mean, look, I didn't create Black Lotus Yoga because I thought there was something wrong with Ashtanga, right? Black Lotus Yoga just represents a kind of natural, a kind of, let's say, an extension of my own exploration, which was supported through and through by Ashtanga for, the first 15 years. So when I first started yoga, I started with Ashtanga right from the beginning. I fell madly in love with it from the very beginning, and I stayed madly in love with it for 15 years. Nothing happened. I had no misgiving. There was nothing about Ashtanga that I felt what was suddenly harming me or holding me back or anything. It was almost as if Ashtanga Yoga finally said to me, as my teacher, it's time for you to go on, right? Take what I taught you, right? And go your way with it, And that started to happen for me very naturally, that, there are various ways of understanding the yoga, of relating to it. I mean, the asana practice itself. Ways of sequencing, ways of breathing, ways of directing the attention through the body that I learned through my exploration, through Ashtanga Yoga, that were nonetheless not really recognized as being canonical, not really recognized as being part of the Ashtanga itself. And, in order to keep evolving as a seeker, I had to follow those understandings. I had to follow those understandings, and they have led me to this new system. Yeah. I mean, let me put it that they led me to a new way of doing yoga. And that way of doing yoga really started to flower during the pandemic because I really had nothing better to do than just practice during that lockdown time, which was such a potent time for me. I really just explored, and something new emerged. And I understood that, through the help of a dear friend, actually, she helped me see that wasn't, as she put it, that wasn't mine to keep, that I needed to share that. And so then I went about systematizing what's now called Black Lotus Yoga in order to share what had been revealed to me, let's say, during those explorations.
Why Black Lotus Yoga? Lotus, we know, I think the symbology related to the lotus, because the blossom in the mud. Mm-hmm. So I think it's quite, everybody's doing yoga knows about this symbology in the lotus, but why is black?
Yeah. So, the white lotus flower that blooms out of the mud is a symbol of the transcendence of sorrow and suffering, right? It's a symbol of transcending this kind of fallen consciousness and becoming something, pure and white. The black lotus is a symbol of the flower that draws the darkness up, spreads it out on its petals, and shows its beauty to the world. Holds its darkness up to the light, where it can be seen. So the black lotus is a symbol of the one who holds both darkness and light, and sees and the symbol celebrates the beauty of that. Mm-hmm. And the profundity, the profundity of being in touch with sorrow, not transcending it, not turning away from it, but staying in touch with it, and even in some sense staying rooted in the wisdom of heartache.
Black is a potent color.
It's a potent color. it's the color of sorrow, and this sort of first noble truth, of the Buddha, which is also a teaching of Patanjali, is that you have to be present with sorrow and embrace it and listen to it in order to really evolve in relationship to it. And that's a profoundly important point.
I just want to come back 1 second to Ashtanga. But is there something in the Ashtanga system as is spread and taught, let's say today, or has been taught like lately, that was like something you say, okay, this is not for me anymore? Maybe you say, I don't know, either like the sequencing or like the system, the authority, I don't know, there's something that you say, we're not here like to criticize or because I understand we acknowledge the importance of a system, but just for, just to clarify, because of course...
for sure, when I went about devising the system, I, drew on my, 15 years of previous observation, to try and make the system as accessible, as adaptable, as sort of friendly to the body, and, also to make it as exhilarating, as inspiring, as truly supportive and sort of sustainable and nourishing as I could possibly make it. And so for sure, there are differences. There are some important differences. I would really rather that if people are interested in trying Black Lotus Yoga, I think it will call to them. It will call to them. And then they'll discover those differences for themselves, And I'd sort of prefer that rather than enumerating them myself.
Yeah, I like that because it's experiential.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, so that's amazing. I always thought it's very powerful in the Ashtanga system is the self-practice, miser. Style.
Yes.
Because the miser style is like a incredible chance to practice at your own pace and with your own capacity, your own rhythm.
It's just magic. There's nothing better.
Amazing.
Yeah.
But sometimes I feel it's almost kind of a missed opportunity. Because sometimes, some people get it and they just practice in their own way. But still we have so many images of how that posture is supposed to be.
Yeah, that's right.
We have a drishti, but then people just, the look roams around, and they see, what is Supta Kurmasana, it's so perfect. We have so much comparison that then, even in a place when it's supposed to be at our own pace, respecting our own limits, whatever, we just tend to push ourselves to do things like to look like the others.
There's that sort of deadening tendency toward conformism, both in the minds of the teachers and in the minds of the students. And it's something that we all have to sort of see in ourselves and then let it go. Let it go so that we can be more receptive, we can feel into the body, we can allow the body to show us how to hold the postures so that the energy flows in the most enriching, nourishing way. And how exactly any of us hold a particular posture is going to be a matter of discovery. On any particular day, you've got to kind of find it. And if you're just trying to make yourself conform to an image, that's a very different kind of process. It's a very different act than listening and trying to discover. So look, Black Lotus Yoga is meant to be practiced Mysore style because there's no better form for that kind of experimentation and discovery. And it's built into the Black Lotus system, both sort of formally in terms of the sequencing, because there are many different variants. But it's also just sort of understood, and it's taught this way from the beginning, that you're meant to take the basic form and find your way of holding it, find your way of embodying it in any given moment.
So you mean, if I understood right, try to explain the system, like, then, as you say, someone has to try and explain, and I love that, but whatever. Do you have a series?
Yes, so there are 6 series, and then I made 3 variants of each series, and I named them white, gray, and black, right? With the understanding that they can be blended together, but the white variant of each series is the most accessible. The gray is a bit more challenging, and the black is more challenging still. And so it shows you that there are at least 3 ways, but of course there are more ways of doing one and the same sequence. And the sequence is important because the series is important because there's a certain energetic arc to it. There's a certain way that it invites the energy to move through the body. But the idea is that you can connect with that, and you must connect with it in your own way, right? You have to find your way into that energetic arc, that energetic movement. And that's the point of the variance.
Okay, so if I understood right, correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying there are 6 series. 6 series, and then you have 3 variants for every posture, but doesn't make it necessarily 18 series. There are still 6 series, but you can practice, let's say, within a series, let's say this posture like in the variant white, this other posture in variant gray, this other in variant black, or all in black, all in gray, all in white, correct?
Exactly, that's right.
Basically, depending on your level, energy, whatever, you can decide. Also, you can do like different
how your
days.
Joints are doing. Yeah, I mean,
it's not fixed. One day I can do the
fixed.
white of these postures, another day I could do like the black, whatever.
Exactly.
If I can do it.
Right. And it shows you that there's scope. There's scope for exploration. There's scope for there are variants that that might not be on some of the materials that I'm giving that other people discover. And like I said, I've been practicing this myself for 5 years now, exclusively, and I've been sharing it first in a limited way, now in a big way, for over 4 years. And every time I share it, every time I teach a workshop, I learned something. And so I've been mostly sharing it I have these hand-drawn sheets, okay? And I've been giving people these sheets and then helping them interpret the hieroglyphics, of course. The sheets keep evolving. They don't evolve much, but there's always like a little tweak here, a little tweak there, and they are evolving in response to my observations of the way that people are relating to them, right? And so I think they improve, they get smoother, they get kind of easier to communicate. Again, the differences at this point are really minor, but I want to keep it open to that kind of evolution. I don't want the research phase to ever be over. I want it to be a little open textured, even a little open source, like we're exploring these patterns together.
But can I say that this is a huge difference from Ashtanga's list?
It is indeed.
It has been taught, or at least how I learned it.
Sure.
Because how I learned it was that, I don't know, you come to Marchasana D.
Yeah, right.
Or maybe.
Right.
But better.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And for me, maybe it was not even a big deal because I have long arms, but
right, so you could do
arms.
It. Yeah, so you could do it. Yeah, that's right. But of course, and as you know, that's, for many then, it's like they just can't relate in a constructive way to many of the postures.
Exactly. When I say, we're sitting Lotus, for many people, Lotus
is not happening. Maybe even there are people for whom it is happening, but it doesn't mean that they should do it.
Yeah.
Because for some people it's comfortable, it's sustainable, and then for other people it's not.
The funny thing that I feel is that there are people who can't ever in their own life do this.
That's right.
And they can do a handstand.
That's right.
They can do like a very deep back bend.
Right.
No problems.
Yeah. So everybody's got different abilities, and it shouldn't be that you have a system where you go up to the point where you can't do something and then you just stop and you don't go any further, because then you might, I mean, you're not exploring the way that energy can move through the body. You're not accessing different energetic pathways and you know, different places that you might be storing memory and all the rest of it.
These are my questions, because I'm using Ashtanga as a reference, not just because I know
because
it.
You're familiar with
exactly, because I'm familiar
with
but I mean, there are these series that are structured in a certain way. But I mean, it might be super smart the way they're structured.
For sure it is. Yeah.
It is,
yeah.
And I don't doubt that. But I just say they're structured in a way when we know that our bodies are all different. The sequence in a way is one, and it's true that everybody's adapting or whatever. But still, there's a reference in every shala. There are these posters. When we see the posture, there's one. When there are the postures perfectly executed by some very advanced practitioner, and even when we see the primary series, we see this posture so perfectly executed, it looks like very advanced.
Right.
And then you think you need to conform to that, correct? That's right. And then, as I say, you know, and you need to do certain things in a certain order. Let's say if you want to do a Shalabhasana, you first need to
do the
stand
whole primary series.
Stand up from Urdhva Dhanurasana.
Sure.
You have first to drop back and stand up.
Yeah.
To be able to do a Shalabhasana, that honestly, I would teach my mom to do the Shalabhasana if she say I have back pain.
Yeah, that would be.
And my question is, if I'm a yoga teacher, would I teach my mom, 70 years old, to do dropbacks?
Obviously not.
I personally wouldn't.
No.
Would I teach Shalabhasana, belly down, like lifting how you
Absolutely.
can?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would. I think it's safe.
Sure.
You know?
Yeah.
And so, but this is the sequence, how it is sequenced.
Yeah. I mean, that's an unfortunate consequence of a certain very rigid and dogmatic approach to Ashtanga. So I wouldn't even, you know, I wouldn't tie it to Ashtanga too tightly, you know.
You mean it's not
because
like...
you could, I mean, you can, of course, there are many great Ashtanga teachers who are not, you know, not holding to that stricture of you can't avail yourself of the wonderful backbending sequence in the second series unless you can drop back or something. You know, that's far too rigid. And really, you know, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. How are you going to learn to drop back if you're doing a practice that's almost exclusively forward folding? And don't say, well, you do so many upward dogs, because it just doesn't, that's not...
But you know that it's taught like that.
It's not, I know it's taught by...
100,000.
It's taught like that by many, you know, but there are many who don't teach like that. You know, it's just that they're perhaps a little quieter about their teaching mode, because there's been a kind of, you know, this is the official doctrine, and so that's been what's sort of most visible. And then people who are teaching a different way tend to be quieter to avoid criticism and...
Correct. But this, I didn't want to bring any controversy or whatever, but I mean, here we're going. You know, to me, one of the reasons that I felt like disconnected...
You totally wanted to bring controversy.
...is that... I won't, so I do it. No, my point was that I'm one of those people who, when I decide to stick to something, I stick to that. And it's not saying that I don't think with my own mind, but I mean, I just to say, okay, I try this system as it is.
Yeah, sure.
I'm like that. And then, you know, and I try for a few years.
Yeah.
I don't say I try for 15 days because I can't understand otherwise.
Yeah.
So when I tried Ashtanga, I say, okay, what is the official source of Ashtanga? You know what it is. It used to be, I think it still is, you know,
the Joyce family.
The Joyce family. So I mean, I went there, I learned how it was like taught there, and I did everything was prescribed to do there.
Yeah.
So when I finally went up from a drawback, I started the second series and so on. But everybody was like every time saying, oh, this is the way, also teaching this is the way. Then, you know, when I, let's say, stopped doing Ashtanga, I found out that 80% of the teachers were actually not even like doing that way themselves or not even teaching that way. What I find that I really love about the thing that you're creating this new system, I feel that, it's a very open way to say, I'm doing something different. I call it with another name. What is a tradition, after all?
What is tradition? I think, in the best case, tradition is a kind of intelligence, and it kind of flows forward organically, and it takes different forms, and
it's a living thing.
It's a living organism, and it changes form, and it's going to change form through the creative acts of the people that are really sort of holding it, and that's how lineages splinter, right? That's how they form different branches. Is through that kind of, someone focuses on something, they absorb the intelligence that's flowing through the tradition, and then when they re-express that intelligence, it comes out in a new and unanticipated form, so I
think it's part of
that's
this experiential always thing that you should keep.
Yeah, absolutely. If you're putting yourself in that space of openness and receptivity, you're putting yourself in a space where you're open to something like that happening. And I think that's what keeps tradition alive. That's what keeps the intelligence, the understanding of how something works. It keeps that alive precisely by allowing it to take to revitalize itself by taking some new form.
So there's another topic that is interesting to me is that, both in Ashtanga, but also I see in your system, there are a lot of postures that are quite I would say advanced. I don't know if advanced is the right word, but in Ashtanga is common because there are the third, fourth series are called Advanced A, Advanced B, or whatever. Yes. So it's a word we can all understand. But my question arises is that what is advanced in yoga?
What is advanced?
Yeah. What is an advanced yogi?
Well, I think an advanced yogi is one who has learned to really listen deeply to the inner movements of the heart, listen deeply to really feel the currents of the body, and allow oneself to be animated spontaneously by those, rather than always having one's movements and one's speech and one's thought mediated by some pre-existing idea or by some expectation. And so taking care to see that one's thoughts and speech and action kind of conform to those expectations, but instead she's opened herself up to the natural movements of the heart, and she allows those movements to take a spontaneous, organic expression through her. She's an advanced yogi.
As yoga is being expressed through postures, a lot like in modern yoga, and you also said, and I agree, but the thing that is being spread mainly through the posture and not much about the philosophy will ever also help people to connect more with their body.
Yes.
And this I feel is a great thing.
Yeah.
But I feel on the other way, I think advanced yoga translates as doing very deep back bends, super hard arm balances. If someone just think, now picture me an advanced yogi. Yeah. Put someone on one arm.
And it's a perfectly acceptable use of the term, right? If you're trying to describe that kind of, because it takes a lot of practice to be able to execute those kinds of forms in the way that a well-practiced yogi would execute them, which is with a good balance of prana and apana, so that there's a good movement of energy through the body. There's a groundedness to the awareness that's holding it all, And in that way, it can be very different from contortion.
But it was my next question.
Yes.
But when I see some people, Cirque du Soleil,
yes,
it might be easier to say, yeah, but they don't have like the breath, they don't have this, they don't have that.
Yeah.
Well, they have an extremely incredible control of the body, the mind, and the focus. When you see even a diver,
no doubt.
diving from like 30 meters high, and
Yeah,
whatever,
no doubt.
you see their focus is on point.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not just about like they know how to move the body.
Yeah, sure.
There's something deep.
Yeah, no doubt.
So
they've achieved
it
a high
becomes,
level.
yeah, exactly. They're achieved some high level. Even I think almost like any very high elite athlete.
Yeah, sure. But look, yoga is full of damaged elite athletes, who've gone through their career, right? And then they need to recover. Right? I mean, there are many dancers, for example, in Ashtanga, many gymnasts, right? Many people who've done some kind of very high level athletic endeavor who can't sustain it, into a later phase of life, and are also looking for a way of relating to their body in a more peaceful and more mature way.
So what's the difference?
Right? I think the difference is that there's a way of kind of forcing your body to conform to an external pattern, and there can be a great focus in that, and you might do it with a very high level of athleticism. But that sense of receptivity there's a receptivity there also in the athleticism, but this sort of deeper receptivity of, I'm trying to open myself to what I actually feel and what my body's telling me about what's good for me, and just feeling the flow of my life force and letting that express itself organically through breath and movement that isn't trying to, the point is not to perform. The point is not to get the body to conform to this particular ultra challenging pattern. Although, it's just to be receptive and to have this relationship to one's own life force, which is one's creative power, right? And to figure, how can I relate to that in a way that I can, I'm not trying to use it to impress anybody anymore.
Yeah.
I'm not trying to use that energy to convince myself, to prove something to myself or to others anymore. But nonetheless, I want to express that energy vibrantly. I want to open myself up to its flow. And so when I open myself up to its flow, it's vibrant. And if I just happen to be a person who has, a relatively high level of athleticism anyway, then it's going to express itself like that, right? And so it's going to express itself in advanced postures and in that kind of superficial sense. And there's going to be a great joy and exuberance in exploring those forms.
Yeah, I remember once interviewed this circus performer who was also doing yoga because she was recovering from some injuries and stuff like that, so it's quite normal. Yeah. And he say, and I'd ask her as well, what was the difference? And say, well, basically, if I perform on stage, I have to impress an audience. When I'm doing yoga, I do it just for myself.
And the consciousness is totally different. The consciousness is totally different.
But thing is,
yeah,
here I'm coming. In nowadays context and world, it's not that the difference is getting a little bit thinner.
Of course.
And also I have another question. That is.
But that's different. That's not yoga, right? That's social media. And that's, and often the yoga teachers are on social media. Perhaps they're trying to attract students, or communicate with students. And perhaps that's even, part of their perhaps even sometimes somewhat skillful means for attracting the attention of a certain kind of person that they want to communicate with and they want to speak to, right? And that's at best, of course, and then it has its dark side too.
Yeah, hopefully, it's a way when then, if someone is interested, you can move them to other like topics and whatever. It's not that,
Yeah.
they can go
Yeah.
deeper. So I mean, it's
Or
not
you're just showing off.
No, it's not necessarily. No, but I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing because actually, it's like a kind of a funnel way when you start very broad. You just attract like almost anyone. Maybe from I mean, we all maybe.
It's not necessarily a bad thing too. For sure, it's something that we give way too much importance to when we spend too much time with
what
it.
I feel.
And it's not good for us.
Correct.
We should do it less.
We talk again about social media, but the other point is that something that I noticed, for example, in totally different fields, let's say soccer. In soccer, there are some of the world's best trainers weren't necessarily the best players. We're kind of average players, but you give them a team and they bring their team, they bring each player in that team like to the top level. And sometimes, I feel maybe, there are teachers out there who are not like the most gifted, like in their body, but they can really help, even on the physical level, they can really...
Yeah, no doubt. The best yoga teachers that I know are relatively unknown, because they don't have that sort of flashy, showy, outwardly impressive kind of practice, or they haven't taken those extra steps to kind of put it out there to attract the attention of others. So they haven't used social media in the way that some of us have.
So what do we have to do with social media? How is a mindful, conscious, responsible way to use social? As we're talking here, we're talking to social media.
I think it's to use it very sparingly, right? And also to sort of use it, to use it very honestly, to use it mindfully, to use it honestly, to use it sparingly. And, for God's sakes, don't waste too much of your life interfacing in any way with social media.
Can I tell you my way that I adopted recently? I mean, before I was kind of having this hate-love relationship, because I was feeling, taking this as a job, I had to do this, I have to do that, I have to. And now I feel just, I want to connect with people. I want to use it like if I want if I make a phone call with a friend, just, the friend is not necessarily replying at the same moment. Maybe he writes a comment.
Yeah.
It's not even a friend, maybe I don't know them.
Yeah.
But I mean, just to use it, I say, okay, I just want to be me for whatever it means. And when I feel this changed a little bit in me because I don't feel like the pressure or whatever. I just feel like, I feel like sharing something. If I feel like sharing, I share it. Otherwise, I won't share it.
Good.
So I think it's possible to have a healthy relationship with social media.
I think so.
It's up to us.
It's up to us.
Thank you very much, Ty, for giving me your time. It's been really a pleasure to have you here, and you're always welcome.
Thank you so much.
Ciao.
Ciao.
And thank you for watching. Thank you.